The night had been planned to be perfect. At the sprawling mansion of a wealthy businessman, a luxurious poolside party was glowing beneath hundreds of warm golden fairy lights. Elegant chandeliers hung near the outdoor dining area, flowers decorated the marble tables, and the crystal-clear swimming pool reflected the lights like a sheet of glass. Dozens of wealthy guests had arrived dressed in expensive evening gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos. Music played softly in the background while waiters and waitresses moved between the guests, carrying trays of champagne, sparkling water, and expensive appetizers. Among them was a young waitress named Emily, a hardworking woman who had taken the job because she desperately needed money to support herself and her younger brother. Unlike the guests around her, Emily wore a simple black sleeveless service dress over a neat white shirt. Her blonde hair was tied back carefully, and despite being exhausted after hours of work, she continued smiling politely at everyone. Emily had spent most of the evening trying to stay invisible. She knew this was not her world. The guests laughed loudly about luxury vacations, private jets, expensive watches, and businesses worth millions. She had learned that the safest thing for someone like her was to keep her head down, do her job, and avoid attention. But that night, one guest seemed determined to make sure she could not remain invisible. A glamorous young woman named Victoria, wearing a stunning red evening gown, had been drinking and laughing with her friends near the pool. Standing beside her was a tall, handsome man in a white tuxedo jacket who seemed to be enjoying the attention surrounding him. Victoria had noticed Emily several times and appeared irritated whenever the waitress came close to her table. "Be careful with that tray," Victoria suddenly said when Emily approached with drinks. Emily immediately stopped. "Of course, ma'am," she replied softly. She carefully placed a glass on the table. But before she could move away, Victoria stepped backward and deliberately bumped into her. The tray nearly slipped from Emily's hands. A few drops of liquid spilled onto the marble floor, but nothing was broken. "I'm so sorry," Emily said quickly, bending down to clean it. Victoria stared at her with an angry expression. "Sorry?" she said loudly. "You nearly ruined my dress." Emily looked at the red gown and realized there was barely a drop on it. "I apologize, ma'am. I can get a cloth immediately." Instead of accepting the apology, Victoria laughed. Her friends laughed with her. Several nearby guests turned around to see what was happening. Emily felt her face burning with embarrassment, but she tried to remain calm. She picked up the tray and stepped away, hoping the humiliation would end there. It did not. A few minutes later, Emily was carrying another tray along the edge of the pool when Victoria approached her again. The music was still playing, guests were still laughing, and nobody seemed to notice the tension building. "You know what your problem is?" Victoria said. Emily stopped and politely asked, "What do you mean?" Victoria smiled coldly. "You act like you belong here." Emily looked confused. "I'm just doing my job." That answer made Victoria laugh even harder. She looked at her friends and then glanced toward the swimming pool. Maybe she needs to cool down. Before Emily could understand what she meant, Victoria grabbed her arm and shoved her. Emily lost her balance instantly. The tray flew from her hands. Glasses shattered against the marble edge, and her body fell backward into the swimming pool with a huge splash. For several seconds, she disappeared beneath the water. When she surfaced, she was gasping for air, completely soaked. Her white shirt clung to her body. Her black dress was heavy with water, and her blonde hair covered part of her face. She looked around in disbelief. Instead of helping her, several people began laughing. Victoria covered her mouth, pretending to be shocked, while her friends laughed openly. Even some of the guests who had witnessed the incident simply stood there holding their drinks, treating Emily's humiliation like entertainment. Emily slowly reached the pool's edge and pulled herself upward. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the crowd, hoping at least one person would offer help, but most people avoided her eyes. The man in the white tuxedo stood beside Victoria, smiling awkwardly as though he did not know whether to laugh or walk away. Emily finally climbed out of the pool and stood dripping on the marble floor. She wanted to cry, but she refused to give Victoria that satisfaction. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Victoria shrugged. "It was just a joke." "Don't be so dramatic." More laughter followed. Then the music suddenly stopped. A hush spread across the entire garden. People began turning toward the mansion entrance. A man had just stepped outside, dressed simply but elegantly in a dark tailored suit. He was calm, confident, and completely different from the loud guests around him. Everyone seemed to recognize him, and their expressions changed immediately. The host hurried toward him, visibly nervous. Emily did not know who he was. She only noticed that the entire party had suddenly gone silent. The mysterious man looked toward the pool, then at Emily standing there soaked and humiliated. His expression hardened. He slowly walked across the marble floor and stopped directly in front of her. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Emily looked past him toward Victoria, who had suddenly lost her smile. Nobody answered. The millionaire looked around at the silent crowd and his voice became colder. "Then I suppose I'll have to find out myself." For the first time that night, nobody was laughing. The garden had become completely silent. Emily stood beside the swimming pool, soaked from head to toe, while the mysterious man in the dark tailored suit looked at the crowd with an expression that made even the most confident guests uncomfortable. The host of the party rushed forward and nervously greeted him. "Mr. Anderson, I didn't know you were coming tonight." The man barely acknowledged him. His eyes remained fixed on Emily. "I asked a simple question," he said calmly. "Who pushed her?" Nobody spoke. Victoria suddenly looked away, and the man in the white tuxedo shifted uneasily beside her. Mr. Anderson noticed everything. He had spent years building his fortune, and one thing he had learned was that silence often revealed more than words. He walked toward Emily and removed his expensive jacket, placing it gently around her shoulders. "You shouldn't be standing here like this," he said. Emily looked at him with confusion. "I'm okay, sir." He shook his head. "No, you're not. And what happened to you is not okay." Victoria finally stepped forward. "It was just a joke," she said, trying to sound confident. Mr. Anderson turned toward her. "A joke?" His voice remained quiet, but the entire garden seemed to hear every word. Victoria crossed her arms. "She was being careless with a tray and I barely pushed her. Nobody was hurt." Mr. Anderson glanced at the broken glasses scattered near the pool. "Nobody was hurt," he repeated. "Look at her." Victoria's expression changed. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the man standing in front of her was not someone she could intimidate. The host hurried to explain that it had been an unfortunate misunderstanding, but Mr. Anderson stopped him. "A misunderstanding is spilling a drink. Deliberately pushing someone into a swimming pool and then laughing while they struggle to get out is something else." The guests remained frozen. The man in the white tuxedo finally spoke. "Sir, I think everyone is making this bigger than it is." Mr. Anderson turned toward him. "And you are?" The man introduced himself, suddenly much less confident than before. Mr. Anderson nodded slowly. "You watched it happen?" The man hesitated. I was standing nearby." "And you helped her?" There was another silence. "No," he admitted. Mr. Anderson looked disappointed rather than angry. "Then you are part of the problem." Those words struck harder than shouting would have. The wealthy guests who had laughed moments earlier now looked uncomfortable. Some lowered their heads. Others began whispering among themselves. Mr. Anderson then asked Emily whether she wanted to leave. She hesitated. "I still have to finish my shift," she said quietly. He stared at her for a moment. "After what happened, you are worried about finishing your shift?" Emily looked down. "If I leave, they may fire me. I need this job." Mr. Anderson's expression softened. "How much do they pay you?" Emily reluctantly told him. The amount was so small compared with the fortune of the people surrounding them that he looked genuinely shocked. "And you work all night for that?" Emily nodded. "I don't have much choice." Mr. Anderson looked toward the host. "She has worked all night while your guests treated her like entertainment. Is this how your staff are treated?" The host immediately shook his head and blamed the guests. But Mr. Anderson did not accept the excuse. He turned back to Emily. "You said you need this job because you have responsibilities?" Emily nodded. She explained that she was trying to save enough money to help her younger brother continue his education. Their parents were no longer able to support them, and Emily had been taking extra shifts whenever she could. She never expected anyone at the party to care about her life. That was why she had tried to endure the humiliation quietly. Mr. Anderson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked toward the crowd. The person who needs help tonight isn't the person who fell into the pool. It's the people who stood around and laughed while she was struggling. Victoria's face turned pale. What are you saying? Mr. Anderson calmly pulled out his phone. I own this property. The host's face immediately changed. Anderson Group owns the mansion, the event company, and several businesses connected to tonight's party, he continued. I came here tonight because I wanted to see how my employees and guests were treated when they thought nobody important was watching. The entire crowd went silent. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. You're the owner? Mr. Anderson nodded. Yes. Her confidence disappeared instantly. The host looked terrified, realizing that his business relationship with the millionaire could be over. Mr. Anderson then asked security to review the cameras. Within minutes, the footage confirmed everything. It clearly showed Victoria deliberately pushing Emily into the pool while laughing with her friends. The evidence left no room for excuses. Mr. Anderson ordered the event company to remove Victoria and anyone who had participated in humiliating Emily from the premises. But he did not stop there. He turned to Emily and said, You came here tonight as a waitress. You are leaving as someone whose courage impressed me. Emily looked stunned. He offered her a position managing guest services for one of his luxury properties, with a salary several times higher than what she had been earning. Emily could barely speak. Why me? She asked. Mr. Anderson smiled. Because tonight, when everyone else laughed, you still tried to remain respectful. You didn't fight back. You didn't insult anyone. You simply endured something you never deserved. He paused before adding, Money can buy beautiful parties, expensive clothes and enormous houses, but it cannot buy character. Tonight, you showed more character than everyone standing around this pool combined. The guests stood speechless as Emily looked at the millionaire. Victoria, who had laughed at her only minutes earlier, could not even meet her eyes. The man in the white tuxedo quietly walked away, embarrassed by his own silence. The music never started again. The party that had begun with luxury and laughter ended with an uncomfortable lesson that nobody there would forget. Emily finally smiled through her tears. She realized that sometimes the worst moment of your life can unexpectedly become the moment that changes everything. And as she walked away from the pool wearing the millionaire's jacket, the same people who had laughed at her moments earlier stood completely silent, watching the waitress they had humiliated walk toward a new life.